Welcome to episode 258 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak encouragement into the hearts of educators and get you informed and energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm wrapping up season 15 of the podcast with some thoughts about where we go from here and what's next in education. Visit truthforteachers.com to get an easy-to-read, easy-to-share version of this podcast episode. This episode is brought to you in part by the Invited MBA. If you're considering a career change, the summer cohort of Invited MBA is just 4 weeks long and under $2,000. Learn how to transfer your skills to the business world, gain confidence in business and financial terminology, and solve real-world business challenges. Former teacher and Invited MBA graduate Gina Curran said, "As a teacher, I always live by see it, hear it, do it. Unless all those things are happening, you won't retain those skills to use in the future. The Invited MBA program did that for me." Truth for Teachers listeners can get a $200 tuition credit. Visit invitedmba.com. With the way demands on educators have increased and become more complex over recent years, you might be wondering if you'll ever be able to get some semblance of a reasonable, sustainable workload. Our 40-hour teacher workweek full-year program kicks off just once a year, every summer, and we're preparing to welcome our next cohort of teachers. Go to 40htw.com to learn more about how you can do a great job for kids without working endlessly on nights and weekends. That's 40htw.com. Let your principal know also about the 40-hour leadership program to help administrators streamline, and see if you can use school funding, grant money, or even donors choose to cover costs. More info is available at 40htw.com. So this is our last episode of season 15 before I take a break over the summer. And I thought a lot about what to say and how to wrap up what seems to have been one of the most demanding and unpredictable school years of many folks' careers. And I feel like this season I've tried to highlight a nice balance of teachers who are happy and thriving, because I think we need positive examples, and also teachers who are speaking very transparently about the challenges right now, the trauma that they and their students have experienced, and just sort of the dire situation that things are in. Because I think we're all having very different lived experiences right now, and I want to validate all of them. There's no singular teaching experience. But when I think about how to wrap up this year, I also think about how to wrap up everything that's happened since March 2020, because it feels like since that time, like this is still just an extension of everything that's happened since then, right? We're just in the next evolution of what's happened. And I feel like I want to give, first off, a more off-the-cuff take. I just have bullet points written out for myself here, so I'll be a little bit more rambly and a little less maybe precise in my words than most of my episodes. This is just more of me talking from the heart. So I wanted to do that. And also I wanted to give more of an optimistic take. And that's because I believe it's needed. I remember back in the early days of the pandemic, back in March 2020, when I was in shock. You have to remember that my husband is based in New York City. We live in that area. And at that time, it really felt like everyone was going to die. Like, it was deeply unsettling to be in New York at that time. And I was scared and depressed, and I had no idea how I was going to support teachers through this sudden shift to remote learning, and then whatever was going to come after that. Once it became clear that this was not just going to be a quick 2-week thing, like we all initially thought, it really hit me hard. And I was looking around desperately for someone who could see a brighter future, not someone who was just continuing on like nothing had changed, but someone who could envision something better. I needed that. And there's a mindset podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners by James Wedmore that I don't listen to a whole lot. I don't listen to any entrepreneurial podcasts that much anymore. I've just sort of lost interest in them. But I was looking for something, and he had such a positive attitude through the entire pandemic. Entire industries were completely crashing. People had lost their livelihoods overnight. And he had just decided he was going to be doing these Airbnbs. And at the time, no one was traveling. So he was in all this debt with these 2 new Airbnbs that he was renovating. And he couldn't get contractors to come in, and no one was traveling, and Airbnb was not happening. And he was like, everyone's saying to me, you're so crazy. And he was like, no, I'm thinking ahead to the future. I'm not thinking about right now. There will be a time where people want to travel again. There will be a time when people need a place to stay when they come into town. So I'm going to keep looking forward. Everything seems very hopeless right now, but I know it's not going to be like that forever. And he was like, what I'm thinking about is Q4 in 2020. So this was like March, April 2020. And he was like, I'm thinking about like, October, November, December 2020. 6 months from now, he says, things are going to be better. And, things are going to be back on track. And, COVID's going to be gone, basically, and everything's going to be great. Now, there were some things about that approach that felt good because it gave me hope. Even though in hindsight now, I can see that prediction of his was wrong, right? Like, obviously, everything was not fine by Q4 of 2020, and some things, in fact, got worse. But some things did get better by then. And some things have gotten increasingly better over time, right? And I feel like it didn't hurt me to believe that the future was brighter. And in fact, in those really dark days when it just seemed like everything was just going to always get worse, to have someone telling me that they thought that better days were ahead was really helpful. To have that mindset that things will improve, to look forward to a time when things would be more stable, that helped me get through a really difficult period in my life. And I think that is something now that people in education, or some people in education, might need. And when I think about the words that I want to leave you with at the end of this podcast season, I would like to do that for you. I would like to offer you that bit of hope that James Wedmore offered me back then, even though everything that he thought was optimistic and didn't all come true. The same thing is true for what I have shared with you. I really, even though I was frightened and discouraged, I really rallied at the start of the pandemic. And, I created a lot of content about how this was our chance to reimagine schools and how I believe that we can come out on the other side of this with something better than we had before the pandemic. I created a whole video training last summer called Better Than Normal, and how to move our schools forward instead of just, trying to get back to what we had before, get back to our old normal. And, it didn't all happen, right? We didn't necessarily reimagine schools. In some ways we did. In some ways we did not. In some ways things got worse. But I still believe that this is our opportunity. I still believe that there are bright spots, that there are teachers who are thriving. There are kids who have rebounded. I still have hope that things can and will get better, and that we will find our way through what to do next together. Because when we believe that the situation is hopeless and irreversibly declining, things are only getting worse, everything's falling apart, then what happens is, just to cope, we mentally and emotionally disengage. And we start to say things like, why vote? It doesn't make a difference. Why speak up? No one listens. Why push for something better? It's never going to happen. And I do think that there are bad actors right now who are purposely undermining public education because they want to privatize it and profit off of it. The same way they've done it with the prison industrial complex, right? And how folks like that succeed is due to apathy from the average citizen. Most Americans are not really invested in the quality of life for inmates. They're not really up on what's going on in the justice system. They really have no idea what living conditions are like in prisons. So it's been relatively easy to privatize prisons and to make life there unbearably difficult. For example, charging families astronomical amounts of money to phone their relatives who are in prison, right? Because it's now a for-profit system. It's not a service anymore. And that's happened because there's been a lot of apathy, and indifference, and people just feeling like they don't really know and they don't really care. And I don't want to see the same thing happen to education, where we all become so apathetic and feel like we can't possibly make a difference, and it's not even worth trying because the situation's so hopeless. When large masses of people adapt that mindset, that's how power-hungry and greedy folks are able to take over. Because while the rest of us are not motivated at all to try to make a difference because we feel like it won't help, they're extremely motivated. They are extremely driven. They're powerful. They have a lot of wealth. And the apathy of the people around them makes it easier for them to succeed. And I don't want to see that happen in public education. I don't want to see that in our country. So many folks have given up. I have gone through periods of giving up. I think we all kind of move in and out of that, right? Like you have hopeless days and you have hopeful days. But I think a lot of people are they're disappointed and disillusioned right now. They're frustrated with what's happening in our country. They feel helpless as they see folks who are intentionally dismantling education and purposefully running off some of our best teachers. And what I don't want to see happen is educators just roll over and accept it and say that we can't have anything better than this. I want to keep fighting for a better world. I want to keep fighting for the schools that our kids deserve. I want to stay engaged. I want to stay hopeful. I want to have a vision for the future that's better than what we have now. If we don't have visionary people who believe that things can improve, who demand better of our leadership, demand more of the folks in charge, who hold our elected officials accountable, then the only folks who still care will be the ones who are just trying to line their own pockets, the ones who are trying to figure out, how do I profit off of this situation? So I'm not saying that you need to be hopeful and optimistic in this moment in time, because I think that's sort of toxic positivity, right? Like telling you have to channel this inner hope. I've tried to share examples this season of teachers who have that inner hope to inspire you and encourage you. But maybe that feeling of hopefulness or optimism is not possible for you in this current level of discouragement that you're feeling in this moment. And that's okay. I'm not telling you that you have to be hopeful. I'm saying that I'm hopeful, and I want my optimism to be comforting and inspiring to you. So if you're also feeling hopeful, then you've got, someone else in that same headspace with you who's ready to keep pushing for better. And if you don't feel like that, then hopefully you receive this as, well, at least someone is looking on the bright side right now. At least someone can see a way forward right now. Someone's looking toward the future and imagining better. And I can be that person for you right now. And frankly, a lot of you have already been that person for me. When I was in my darkest spot, ironically, which was Q4 of 2020, when James Wedmore was saying that things were going to get better, that was my darkest spot. I was so depressed about what I saw happening and the lack of reimagining in schools and how we were just not doing right by kids or teachers, and just watching public sentiment turn against teachers in a way I'd never seen before. I had to pull back online. I took my first month-long sabbatical, and so many of you reached out to support me, like thousands and thousands of messages of support when I said, I'm completely burnt out. I don't have anything else to give. And you were so kind at a time when I could not be optimistic and energized for you. And I feel like that's how relationships are supposed to work, right? We can't all be amazing and inspirational at all times. When I'm weak, you step up and support me. When you're weak, I can step up and support you. And I see that in the relationship that I have with folks who follow my work and listen to this podcast. That at the beginning of the pandemic, I was strong. I was visionary for you. I talked about flexible, resilient pedagogy and reimagining education. And then I had a low point, and you encouraged me. And now slowly since that time, I've been feeling stronger and stronger. And I would say I'm at my most energized now, more than any time since before the pandemic started. And I was feeling a little bit of burnout right before the pandemic too. So this is my best in years. I am the most passionate about my work that I have been in recent memory. And since you may not be feeling that way about your work right now, or you may be surrounded by other educators who aren't feeling that way, I want to be that person for you right now. I want you to know that I do believe we can get through this. I do believe we can create something better for students and educators and schools. And the interesting part of all of this, and I think one of the hardest parts of all of this, is that it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. There are no systemic or societal problems happening right now in which a one-size-fits-all solution is going to work, which is why these problems are so difficult to solve, right? Like, how do we solve the housing crisis? Well, it's not going to be one thing. And one thing might fix it for some people or some aspects, but not everyone. So we have to learn to think about in more nuanced ways. We have to learn to be okay with both and instead of either or, and we have to be able to think broadly. And when it comes to education, I don't think we're ever going back to the days where everyone's just happy with their local public school. I think that decades ago, in the average small town suburban area in America, there was maybe one local public school, maybe one private school for you, one local grocery store, one local whatever. And that's just where you went. And whatever they were teaching at your local church is where you went. And, whatever they were teaching at your local public school, that's what your kids learned. Now, obviously, I'm painting with a very, very broad brush, but stay with me here, right? Like, that was the mentality back then. There were just limited choices and options. We didn't have the internet. We didn't know what was happening, and we didn't know what else was available to us. And now, for better and for worse, because there's positives and negatives of this, we live in such a diverse, interconnected world where we have so many options, not just about where or if we practice a religion, where or if you send your kids to school, where you shop for food, where you eat, like what your lifestyle is going to be, what your hobbies are going to be. Like, we have so many more choices. And I feel like that is very much, America is a very individualistic nation, and we like to have our own personal freedom and expression. Being able to express ourselves and be unique is something that's very valued in our culture. And that has evolved over time with technology changes and things like that, to a point where, remember the Burger King Have It Your Way and how that sort of revolutionized the fast food industry back in the day? All of a sudden you could you don't just have a regular cheeseburger with the things that come on it. You can actually build your own whatever. I feel like that's where we're at now as a society. Everybody wants to build their own whatever. It's I want to have it my way. I want it personalized, customized to me. I want it when I want it, how I want it. And again, that's for better or for worse. There's positives to that, because one size fits all education didn't used to work, right? Like in the 1950s, who were we actually educating? Were neurodivergent kids getting a fair shake, for example? That's just one example, right? So we're attempting to do a lot more now. There's a lot more, a diverse set of needs and interests and cultures and languages that we are attempting to cater to and support, which is a good thing. But because of that, we can't go back into the days where people just accepted whatever was happening at that school, because we don't do that in any other aspect of life, right? Like, everybody wants things cater to them. And we have many, many choices about lots and lots of different things. And the world is becoming more like that, not less like that. And so I don't know that one local public school is ever going to meet the needs of all kids in that community. I don't think so. I don't know that it ever did, frankly. For many years, we did not try. We picked and chose which children we were going to educate and which ones we were not. And I think recently we've been trying, and it's been incredibly difficult. That's been a huge part of the problem. We don't have the money and the resources to do that well for every single kid and all of their different needs and all of the family's different needs and preferences. So when we're at a time in education in which families are asking for the literal exact opposite of each other, this family is saying, I want to see our family represented and included in the curriculum and in the interactions in the classroom. And then this family over here is saying, I don't want my kids to know about that at all. Leave it out. You cannot please both of those parents, right? They're asking for opposite things. And so moving forward as a local public school that's supposed to educate everyone is just incredibly tricky. And I believe deeply in the concept of public schools. If you're wondering why I'm not talking about private or charter or whatever, I support all teachers everywhere, including homeschool teachers. Anywhere you're teaching, I want to have your back, and I want to advocate for you and for the students that you're teaching to get the best possible education and outcomes in whatever context you have. But I believe so deeply in public education because I know how hard fought it was. I know how women were not included, how people of color were not included, how people with disabilities were not included, how people who are neurodivergent were not included. They were not educated the way that they deserved to be educated for countless years. And people have fought to have public education as an entitlement, as something that every child in this country gets for free. I don't think that public education would pass now if we didn't already have it. Imagine if we didn't have free K-12 education in this country. Do you think our current Congress could ever agree to fund free education for every single child? I don't think so. So I am very hesitant to let it go or overly criticize it to the point where people think we should just disband public schools and give up. Public schools are the thing that unites us in some ways. It is our commonality. It is the thing that brings us together. It gives us a shared sense of values. And that's going to be really hard when the country is very divided on lots of different things. So obviously, I don't have a neat packaged solution for that. I just want to acknowledge it. I just want to put it out there that I think that's how things are changing. And I think if we try to go back to this idea of one school that meets the needs for everyone, I just don't know how successful that's going to be, honestly. And I think about what some parents have gotten used to during remote learning. Like they're used to being able to just pull their kids out and go on vacation for a week and, all the lessons are recorded. So we'll just watch it later or we'll watch it at home. Like the customization, personalization thing has been ramped up even more because of remote learning. And so the ideas that I am playing around with, what I am freedom dreaming about is the idea of maybe a school within a school, right? Like there's some communities that are trying this where, this wing of the school is focused on STEM and this wing of the school is focused on, the arts or something like that. So we're catering more to the types of education that kids need. I like the idea of having multiple public schools with different teaching philosophies where parents can send their child to the place that's right for them. So maybe in your neighborhood, I would think like at the secondary level, you would probably have the wings, right? Like the schools within a schools. But because there are more elementary schools, maybe there's like 2 that are close to your house, right? And one does a more traditional curriculum and attracts teachers who want to teach more traditional ways. And then there's maybe the other one is more tech focused or social justice focused or critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration, maybe like more Montessori hands-on base. I'm totally spitballing here. I told you this episode is me just like rambling and talking off the top of my head. So I'm dreaming. I'm just dreaming, envisioning of different things to do rather than try to force all teachers to teach the same way and all parents to be happy with whatever the local public school is doing. Choice makes sense, right? Now, you might be thinking, well, this is what advocates of private and charter schools have said. Yes, they do. And it's tricky for me because I've never been a fan of siphoning off public funds to private schools because I feel like there are kids who get left behind. I feel like it's a way to weaken public education. It's also a way to self-segregate. So, if you don't want your children in the classroom with those kids, whether those kids are immigrants or people of a different race or people who speak a different language, you can pull them out and send them to your own private school where they can accept only the students that they want to accept. The beauty of public schools is we take everybody. All children are welcome and included, right? When you begin to privatize, you can discriminate. And you can say, I don't want a gay family. I don't want this. I don't want that. And they're allowed to do that. And that makes me worried about who's going to get left behind. And it makes me worry about discrepancies in the quality of education. It's deep. I don't want to go too deep into that. What I am dreaming of is a way to offer choice without privatization. A way to offer parents and children opportunities to find a teacher and a learning methodology and a curriculum that fits their needs and their preferences, that doesn't discriminate, doesn't devolve into self-segregation where we're in these little silos only with other people exactly like us, and where we're not leaving behind children who don't have family members who can advocate for them strongly and make sure that their needs are met. What I don't want to see is an unhealthy fracturing. Even though I am talking about sort of like breaking schools up a bit, it is a fracturing, but there's a way to do it that I think could be healthy. So this is just a daydream. This is a vision. This is something I'm thinking through. It's obviously not fully thought through all the way. I'm just sharing, because right now I know it's impossible for you to please all of the parents and all of these different stakeholders in your school, and meeting the needs of families with opposing value systems is hard. And I think it's going to get harder because we're not past that yet. And I think the pressure on teachers will ease when we work through this very tumultuous time in history. And I hope we come out on the other side with better relationships and a shared sense of purpose for our schools. I think regardless of whether we can offer the different options, the schools within schools and so on, regardless of what else is happening, we do have to find our commonalities, I think, and try to build from there. Like, what is the smallest thing that we here in our local school community can agree on that we want for children? What's the smallest thing? And work toward that. So instead of trying to tackle a huge problem together with people who are on the opposite end of the ideological spectrum, look for something small that we have in common and try to build some consensus from there. So, for example, I was recently having a conversation with a close family member who disagrees with me about Roe v. Wade. And that person and I are probably never going to come to consensus. We are never going to want the same laws. However, as we talked more, it became obvious that we both felt that the adoption process needs improvement and that our healthcare system needs to be doing a better job supporting pregnant women and children so that their needs are provided for and they're not incurring medical debt. If you're going to carry a pregnancy to term, then who's paying for that, right? And we need to do a better job as a country for women and kids. So this family member and I were able to build consensus around adoption and healthcare, at least in some small ways. Even though we don't agree on the larger issue, that's something that we could work toward that would actually improve the quality of life for many, many people. It's a goal we're striving for, right? And I think the same thing can be true in our school communities. There might be something just very minor that we want to change. Maybe there are folks on opposing sides of the curriculum issues who all want to see their children have dedicated recess time on a daily basis. Recess has been declining. Some states have gotten away from it. I used to teach in a school that didn't allow any recess past first grade. So that could be something maybe that in conversation we realize, oh, there's a whole lot of us here who are concerned about that. Or, maybe it's excessive testing. That's a bigger problem to solve. But I found that folks on all ends of the political spectrum realize that we are putting too much emphasis on the test and that sort of thing. So maybe there's some consensus around that. If you can find something that you agree on your school board and your school community, and so on, and you work together on that one thing, then what happens is you build trust with each other. And it creates this shared sense of accomplishment. So imagine it, here's this other group of folks that I disagree with vehemently on so many issues, but they care about getting our students outdoors and letting them play outside during the school day, just like I do. And we're able to have conversations together. I'm able to work alongside them and advocate alongside them to improve that situation. If we do that, what else might we be able to accomplish together? I think it's a really powerful starting point to just find something small that you can agree on. And it gives us a chance to connect on a human level with people that we might not understand very well. And to be clear, I'm not saying that anyone has a responsibility to collaborate with a group of people who are actively working to oppress and marginalize them. But I am saying that in instances in which we can extend ourselves to work together with other school stakeholders and accomplish something that we both believe in, when we are able to do that, it does open the doors for more discussions and more progress. And I think that sometimes we need to just be willing to start small and focus on small victories. There's so many huge, overwhelming problems that it can just be how can we possibly fix all of it? And we can't. So we have to focus on the little stuff and let it grow from there, rather than starting with the big thing and hoping that it sort of trickles down, right? How can we make it a little bit better for just our students in the school community? And I think this is going to be increasingly true over the next few years, at least, in which our country is just so divided on so many things. I don't think there's going to be a lot of things that happen in the US that will feel like a total win for anyone. I think there's going to be a lot of push and pull. There's going to be a lot of steps forward and then steps backward. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of incremental change. We'll get one thing done and people will say, okay, all right, let's just quickly move on. We got so much else to do. Let's move on. Let's do this next thing. Let's take it even further. And just like I said to you in the recent episode called What If We Stopped Moving Goalposts and Just Enjoyed Where We're At? I think that when we experience small wins and little victories in our school communities, we need to celebrate them. We need to focus on the things that we do all want and agree on sometimes. And we need to work to accomplish those things rather than hoping to remake public schools or any aspect of our country totally in one image, because there's just always going to be that push-pull. And I think focusing on the small stuff and building is a good way to go when we feel too helpless to create the bigger change that's needed. It's a starting point. And I think that student choice helps with that. I think choice within schools helps with that. And I think that consensus building helps with that. I don't know if that's a solution for everything. I don't think that it is, but I think it's going to have to be part of the solution. And I think the only way forward is through it, right? Like it's like people who were living in 1954, right? Like it was a tumultuous time in history. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of unrest and instability. But we had to go through that to get to the place that we're at now. And I feel like we're living in another one of those times in history, which just feels like the ground has been shaken underneath of us, and things that we thought we knew for sure were true are maybe no longer true. And institutions that we trusted, we maybe no longer trust. And that's difficult, but we will go through that and we will come out on the other side with something better than what we have before. I have to believe that because it gives me hope and keeps me from getting depressed. And I have to believe that because I want to keep working toward that. So my prediction is that there's going to be lots and lots of different ways that kids are learning. And the same way there's lots of different parenting styles. Families are raising their kids with all different kinds of values and norms and cultures and priorities. We are not a monocultural society. And I think our schools will continue to offer more choices and more flexibility. We've been talking about student choice for 10, 15 years now. That's not going away, because that's at least the starting place, right? Like if we can't have the school within a school type of thing or whatever, at least we can offer choice within the classroom. And that's tough. I know it's tough because it means teachers are now having to offer lots of different things instead of just the one thing. But I do think that with more self-paced learning, a couple episodes ago, I did that interview with Kareem Farah from the Modern Classrooms Project, and he talked about that. How do we do mastery-based grading? How do we do self-paced learning? Like this more student-driven approach, I think, is going to ease a lot of the problems. I think that is the future. I think that's good for kids, and I think it's good for teachers. And anytime I can find that overlap between what's good for kids and what's good for teachers, I want to run with it. So I think that is that's part of the path forward. And getting to whatever is next in education will be a hard road. And I don't think we're there yet. In my interview with Jessica Kirkland about how the kids fared during this pandemic, it was called Are the Kids All Right? She said, she's a teacher, and she's like, we're not at the rebuilding stage yet. We're at the stage where we need to be imagining and envisioning what we want. First, we have to come to terms with what's happened. We need to see it for all that it is, and we need to heal. We have not healed. We have not processed our trauma from the last 2 years of schooling, 2.5, whatever. After we process, then the rebuilding comes. That was her thought. So I think we're in this really difficult and awkward and painful and uncomfortable and hard phase where we can't rebuild yet because we haven't healed. You can't. You have to, there's a big gaping wound right now that has to heal first before we start building up our strength again, right? And moving forward. But I do think that this time of healing will lead to something better. And I do have high hopes for the coming school year. So my hope for you is that you would be able to spend some time this summer processing and healing so that you can be ready to rebuild in the fall. I know that in many, if not most school districts, the processing and healing is not going to be sufficient. It's not going to be what teachers and kids need. There's so much pressure to just move forward like nothing happened and start catching kids up and get back on track and overcome learning loss. But internally, we can still be doing the work that needs to be done, right? We can still be doing the personal development to process and heal and envision better so that we can rebuild. So I encourage you to use some time this summer to work through the things that you've experienced and begin to heal from that. Use the summer for healing activities. Do things that restore your soul. Get out in nature. Spend time in your hobbies. Spend time with people you love. Sleep. You're probably so sleep deprived. Prioritize sleep. Prioritize rest. Only you know what's really needed. Only you know what's doable, given all the other obligations and caretaking and duties that are on your plate this summer. But I encourage you to really make this summer a time for processing and healing so that next school year you'll be ready to rebuild. I feel like the last 2 summers, teachers really didn't get a break. They came back in August or September and were just not rejuvenated at all. At all. The summer was not restful and it was not long enough. When you've been through an extended period of stress like this, it takes longer to heal. So I hope that this summer can be a time for that healing. And I will be here. I'm not podcasting this summer. I always take June and July off. I need a break so I can come back re-inspired. I feel like part of my work this summer in healing and processing is to continue to develop this envisionment of something better and connect with folks who have found better. I would love for you to reach out to me. Just go to truthforteachers.com. You'll find my contact information. Or you can email me at angela@truthforteachers.com. If you are in a school within a school, if you have done this thing where you're able to offer choice within the public school system without privatizing it, if you have found ways to give kids more flexibility and choice without making it so that teachers are creating 500 different lesson plans for every single activity, if you have found things that are working, I want to connect with you. I want to amplify your story. I want to share it to inspire other educators and to give them a path forward, because these are all just things that I'm thinking about. I want to bound together with other like-minded folks like that. So I will be spending my summer thinking and processing and dreaming. And I have 2 things that I'm doing this summer that I think are going to really help with that, which is that I will be traveling to Egypt in June and Switzerland in July. So I'm going with an organization called Teach with Love Global. It is a cultural immersion program for teachers. It is a nonprofit and it is led by women of color. My good friend Taina Benitez, who will be on the podcast, I'm going to bring her on in the fall. She's going to be on both of those trips with me, and we're going to be talking about what we've learned and what takeaways we have for our school system in America. And travel changes you. There's nothing like travel to shake you out of your rut and help you question cultural norms, and to realize that some of the expectations you have for yourself and your life were just status quo. Like you just never thought that maybe there could be a different way. And then you go to a different country and you're like, oh, that's how they do it like that there. Oh, okay. Very interesting. Like, I know I'm going to come back a changed person, and having all those conversations with educators, there's 20 teachers on each trip. So having those conversations, for 10 days each time is just, it's going to be a game changer. So I'm sure those experiences will change what I'm thinking about this. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you in the fall on the podcast. And of course I'll be sharing on social media. On Twitter, it's Angela dash or hyphen, I forget what it is. Angela Watson is Angela.Watson on Instagram, and it's Truth for Teachers on TikTok. Also this summer, we will be kicking off the July 2022 cohort of the 40-hour Teacher Workweek program. And we'll be also leading the next cohort of the 40-hour leadership program, which is for school administrators, and 40-hour instructional coaching for ICs. So if you are interested in joining us and having this community of educators next school year to support and encourage you as we think together about this rebuilding process, I encourage you to check it out. It's at 40htw.com. So the purpose of the program is to help you streamline your workflow and stay focused on what matters most. We've already helped over 48,000 teachers. This program has been running for 7 years now. And the goal is stop working endlessly on nights and weekends and maximize your contractual time. It is possible. So I'm excited about this year's cohort as a full year program because I really do think this is a pivotal year coming up. I think this is going to be a key school year where we figure out what things are going to look like going forward. And I want to make sure that whatever we're rebuilding is better for teachers and kids than what we had before the pandemic. What we were doing before was not working. Like, let's never forget that. Just going back to 2019 was not exactly like a banner year in terms of like teacher morale and student achievement. Like we were way over testing and, we need to solve some of these larger problems that existed even before the pandemic. So I want us to really take a look at all the things we're attempting to do in schools with not enough support and money and resources and do fewer things better. I want to focus in on what really makes a difference for kids, give our all in those areas, and simplify the rest. And I want to see educators, that includes teachers, administrators, instructional coaches, everyone working in schools, all staff, find ways to reduce the emotional burden and that constant worrying about school and planning and just giving endlessly to a job that always seems to demand more. I want to help create a better way, and I hope that the 40-hour program can play a small part in that. So those are my thoughts that I leave you with before my summer break from the podcast and your summer break from teaching. Let me know what you think. It would mean so much to me if you would leave a review on iTunes. I don't ask for reviews very often, but I do read every single one, and they make a huge difference in the podcast rankings. Let me know also what you think about these more like rambly episodes. I like to be really respectful of your time and keep things short, tight, focused. I try not to go down off rabbit trails. And I also try to be really careful with my words too, because my words matter. Like this is impacting a lot of different people. And I don't want to I'm sure I have casually tossed something out in this episode that I'm going to get called out on. Someone's going to say, that was incorrect. That was insensitive. You should not have phrased it that way. You forgot about this. What about this? Like that is the problem when I don't super plan things out. That's part of why I like to plan things out, because when you have a platform, you have a responsibility to be conscious of the power of your words and not take that too lightly. But sometimes I do need to be lighter about it. Sometimes I just want to just talk from the heart and just share with you what I'm thinking, even if my ideas are not fully fleshed out, even if they're silly, even if they're whatever. So let me know what you think about that, because I'd like to do that, not all the time. Like I think it would ruin the podcast if it was always like this. But this is who I am. This is how I talk to my friends in education. This is me. So I just want to share a little bit of that. And I wanted to just give you a little bit of encouragement. A lot of people are super down right now, and I thought it might be helpful to hear from someone who is optimistic. And I want to say also, don't judge the entire profession and your entire career trajectory based on how you're feeling right now. That's never a good idea, but it's especially not a good idea at the end of the school year. And it's especially not a good idea at the end of the school year after teaching, in a pandemic. At the end of the school year, it's very normal to feel burnt out and unenthusiastic. Teachers are just like, they've had it. Like they've been dealing with these same problems month after month after month, and the end is in sight, and they just need a break. And so do the kids. So it's normal to feel like, I cannot do this anymore at this time of the year. So power through these last few days or weeks of school, depending on when you're listening to this and what your school year is structured like. And then give yourself time to process and heal the summer so that we can come back in the fall and we can rebuild together. And then I'll be back on the podcast in August to help you kick off the school year with an attitude of hope and resilience and optimism and determination to use your life to help create the world that we want to live in and that we want our kids to inherit. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it.